Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to talk about a topic that is very close to the teenage experience: peer pressure. This is something that doesn't only affect us in obvious ways, like being asked to try something risky, but also in subtle ways. In how we dress, what hobbies we take up, even the way we speak. Peer pressure can be positive, pushing us to grow, or negative, pulling us into behaviors we later regret. In this session, we will look at what peer pressure really means, the different forms it takes, the reason why teenagers are especially vulnerable to it, and most importantly, how to respond in a way that protects our values and helps us grow. We will share real life examples, reflect on our experience, and even role-play some scenarios. So let's begin with the foundation. What do we mean when we talk about peer pressure? Humaira, can you help us define it in simple but clear terms?
Thank you, NAFIS. Peer pressure to me is the visible influence that people of our own age group, our peers, have on us. It doesn't always come in the form of direct instruction. Sometimes it's as simple as watching what everyone else is doing and feeling an unspoken pressure to do the same. For example, if your classmates all download the latest online game and talk about it every day, you may feel the need to download it too. Not because you want the game, but because you want to be included in the conversation. That's the essence of peer pressure, the push to fit in.
So, you're saying that peer pressure doesn't always look like someone saying, you must do this, but sometimes it's just the silent weight or expectations and the fear of being left out.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful sometimes. Sometimes you can even pinpoint where the pressure is coming from. You just feel it.
I like to add that peer pressure isn't always harmful. We usually hear it being linked to bad decision, but it can also be a source of growth. For example, I once joined a community service project only because my friends wouldn't stop encouraging me. At first, I wanted to say no, but because I thought it would take too much time. But after I joined, I realized it gave me valuable experience. Meeting people, learning teamwork, and even feeling proud about contributing to society. That's the positive side of peer pressure. But of course, there's also the negative side, like when peers encourage risky behaviors such as smoking, cheating on exam, or bullying. Both exist side by side, and what matters is recognizing the difference.
That's an important distinction. It means peer pressure is not something we can avoid completely. It's about learning to filter, to know when it's a force for growth and when it's something that harms us. Okay, let's think about what peer pressure feels so strong. Sometimes it's not about the activity itself, but about the emotional consequences. Many teenagers are terrified of being labeled as boring, weak, or cowardly. That fear can be stronger than the actual desire to take part.
Yes, Nafis, I experienced that myself. I once refused to go to a party because I had an important exam the next day. The whole night, I didn't feel proud of my
something is wrong, but the emotional cost of saying no feels heavier than the practical consequences of saying yes. That's the tricky part.
Okay, let's explore the impacts of peer pressure. Myra, would you start us off?
Sure, peer pressure has two faces. On the positive side, it can motivate us to work harder academically because we don't want to fall behind our friends. It can push us to healthy habits like joining sports, exercising together, or learning new skills. But the negative side is equally strong. It can lead us into risky behavior like what Huda said earlier, like substance abuse, skipping classes, or becoming involved in bullying. Perhaps the most damaging impact is on self-esteem because constantly we comparing ourselves to others. By comparing ourselves to others can make us feel like we're never enough.
I agree with you, and I think it's important to point out that the negative impacts often last longer. I knew a friend who started with binges to planning. At first it seemed small, but over time he got addicted. It started as a moment of pressure, but it turned into a long-term habit. On the other hand, I also knew someone who improved in public speaking because his friend kept challenging him to join competitions. So the same mechanism influence from peers can either make or break us.
That's very true from both of you. What I find fascinating is how quickly one small decision can spiral into long-term consequences. Sometimes we think it's just one harmless moment of fitting in, but it sets a pattern, and sometimes a push from friends can uncover strengths we never knew we had. The real challenge is how do we recognize the difference before it's too late. Peer pressure is really tied to identity. During teenage years, we don't always know who we are yet. That's why we let the group define us. When we are adults, our identity is stronger. We know what we stand for, and we don't feel the same need for constant approval. But as teenagers, losing friends feels like losing everything. That makes us vulnerable. But if we don't start building that inner compass early, we will depending on external voices, and that can be dangerous in the long run.
I agree with that, Nafis. I think teenagers are like sponges. We absorb everything around us. The desire to belong is almost like a survival instinct. That's why peer influence feels so overwhelming. Even if we know something is wrong, the fear of isolation can outweigh the fear of consequences.
And with social media, that feeling is magnified. Before, peer pressure mostly happened face-to-face at school. Now it follows us everywhere on Instagram, TikTok, and group chats. If your peers are posting about trends, diet, or parties, you feel like you must join in or risk being invisible. That's why the pressure doesn't stop at school gate anymore. It's constant.
Okay, let's test this with a scenario. Imagine someone offers you a cigarette and says, "Come on, everyone is doing it." How would you respond?
If it were me, I'd say, no thanks, I don't smoke. Very direct. If they try to push again, I remove myself from the situation. I believe the shorter the firmer the response, the better. Because arguing might just drag you deeper into the pressure.
My style would be different. I try to reflect by saying something like, "Now I'm hungry. Let's grab a snack." Sometimes changing the subject works better than confrontation. It keeps the friendship intact while still safe.
If I will probably use humor. I will joke. If everyone jumps off a cliff, should I do it too? That way, I'm making my revision clear but in a light-hearted way that doesn't create tension. Sometimes, laughter can break the pressure.
It's interesting how we all have different approaches. What matters is not the method, but the consistency. Whether you say no firmly, use humor, or redirect. The key is that you don't give in. Once you give in, the first time, the second time becomes easier. And soon, it's a habit.
Exactly, and resisting once builds strength for the next time. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you practice saying no, the stronger you become. That's why starting small matters, even saying no to minor peer pressure, like skipping a meeting, prepares you for bigger challenges later.
Okay. Do you think peer pressure looks different for boys and girls?
Yes, in some ways. Boys often face pressure to look tough, to take risks, or to hide their emotion. If you're sensitive, people might tease you as weak. On the other hand, girls often face pressure related to appearance, fashion, makeups, body image, but at the core, it's the same mechanism, doing things to gain approval.
And sometimes those pressures overlap. For example, both boys and girls may feel pressure to grow up fast, to act older, to date early, to behave beyond their age just to seem cool. The kind of pressure cut across gender.
Okay, let's not forget academics. Do you think peer pressure influences how we perform in school?
Absolutely. When your friends are competitive, it can drive you to study harder. That's the good side, but it can also create jealousy and stress. I knew a student who studied excessively, but just to beat her friends. She performed well, but she also burned out emotionally. So academic peer pressure is a double-edged sword.
I had a similar case. My classmates were all top scorers, and I constantly felt inferior. On one hand, it motivated me to work harder, but on the other, it created anxiety. I was never studying for myself, but to prove I'm not, that's when I realized that the line between motivation and pressure is very thin.
That's a great explanation from you. Now, let's think long term. Peer pressure might start small in school, but its effects don't just vanish after graduation. If we keep saying yes to things we don't believe in, we may carry that habit into adulthood. Imagine being in the workplace, agreeing to unethical practices just to fit in with colleagues, or in relationships, tolerating unhealthy dynamics because you are scared of being alone. The inability to resist peer influence doesn't stop at teenage years. It shapes how we make decisions for the rest of our lives. That's why learning to handle peer pressure early is not just about surviving high school, it's about preparing for adulthood.
I agree. I once read about employees who participated in corporate scandals because everyone in the team was doing it. They didn't want to be the one who spoke out. That's adult peer pressure. It proves that what we practice as teenagers become the blueprint for our future behavior.
So what can we do to resist? I think the first strategy is self-awareness. If you don't know your own values, you will always bend to others. That means taking time to ask yourself, what do I believe in? What matters most to me? When you are clear about that, it becomes easier to stand your ground.
Another strategy is having a support system. If you're surrounded by people who respect your decision, peer pressure has less power. That's why choosing your circle wisely is important. Friends who push you towards your goals are worth keeping. Friends who constantly pressure you negatively are worth letting go.
And let's not forget communication skills. Sometimes it's not about what you say, but how you say it. A polite refusal delivered confidently often earns more respect than silence or hesitation. Rooting that confidence is like armor against pressure.
From this exercise, I noticed something. Refusing peer pressure isn't about using the same script. It's about finding what fits your personality. Some people are direct, others use humor, others give alternatives. What matters is consistency.
Yes, and also confident. If you hesitate, people will keep pushing. If you sound sure, even a short answer is enough to end the pressure. It's not just what you say, but how firmly you say it.
This roleplay shows us that resisting doesn't have to mean confrontation. It can be done respectfully, calmly, and even with empathy. That's a skill worth practicing not only in peer situations but in all of life's challenges.
Not all peer pressure is bad though. I remember when I was too nervous to audition for the school debate team, my friend practically dragged me to sign up. At first, I was annoyed, but in the end, it changed my life. I discovered my talent for public speaking, which I would have never found if they hadn't pressured me in a positive way.
That happened to me too. I was scared of joining a science competition, but my friends encouraged me. They didn't just pressure me, they supported me, studied with me, and helped me prepare. Without them, I might have missed the opportunity. So yes, sometimes pressure becomes motivation when it's aligned with your goal.
Those stories remind us that peer pressure isn't black and white. It can either push us down or lift us up. The difference lies in whether the pressure respects our well-being and goals. Another interesting angle is culture. In some cultures, conformity is seen as positive and following the group is a sign of respect. In others, individuality is prized. So, peer pressure might feel heavier or lighter depending on cultural background. For example, in collectivist societies, saying no to peers may feel like rejecting the whole community. That makes resistance harder.
That's true. I grew up in a family where unity was valued, so I often feel guilty when I wanted to say no. It wasn't just peer pressure from friends, but also from the cultural norms of not breaking harmony.
I had the opposite experience. My family always say, stand on your own 2 feet. So I felt less afraid to say no. That shows how culture shapes our response. Peer pressure isn't just personal, it's also social.
I think teachers and mentors play a huge role in guiding us through peer pressure. Sometimes students feel like adults don't understand, but when teachers share their own experiences, it makes a difference. They become role models, showing us that it's possible to stand firm.
Mentorship is powerful. I once had a senior student who reminded me that saying no was not weakness, but strength. Just hearing that from someone I respect made me braver. We often underestimate the influence of role models, but they can counterbalance peer pressure.
That's why schools and communities should create safe spaces for open conversations. If students only discuss peer pressure among themselves, they might reinforce their problem. But if elders and mentors step in, they can redirect the conversation towards healthier choices. Okay, let's bring in a psychological perspective. Peer pressure often links to concepts like conformity and social identity. Psychologists like Solomon Asch prove that people will even give the wrong answer if everyone else in the group does the same. That shows how powerful group influence is. It can override our logic.
Exactly. And Erickson's theory of adolescence says teenagers are in a stage of identity versus role confusion. Because we're still figuring out who we are, we're more likely to copy others. Peer pressure fills that gap until we find our own identity.
So peer pressure isn't just a social issue, it's also a developmental one. It's almost like a stage we all pass through, but how we handle it determines whether we emerge stronger or more confused.
Another important issue is mental health. Peer pressure can trigger anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, especially when we consistently feel we're not good enough. Some students even develop social anxiety because they fear being judged.
Yes, I had a friend who became withdrawn because she couldn't keep up with the latest fashion trends. She felt she didn't belong. That kind of emotional pressure can hurt more than physical pressure.
So that's why peer pressure is not just about behavior, but also about how we feel about ourselves. Building mental resilience is just as important as resisting harmful activities.
Sometimes, peer pressure can turn someone into a leader. If you're the one who stands firm and refuses to give in, others might secretly admire your courage. Eventually, they might follow your lead. So resisting peer pressure doesn't only protect you, it can also inspire others.
I saw that happens once. The student refused to cheat during an exam, and because of that, others decided not to cheat either. His bravery broke the chain of negative peer pressure.
That shows leadership isn't always about authority. Sometimes it's about having the courage to stand alone. And by doing so, creating a new standard for the group.
It's interesting to compare how peer pressure looks in different countries. In some Western schools, pressure might come in the form of parties, drinking, or dating. In some Asian schools, peer pressure might be more about grades, careers, or family expectations. So the shape of peer pressure changes depending on the society.
Yes, but the common factor is the need to belong. Whether it's partying or getting top marks, the root is the same. We don't want to be excluded. That proof peer pressure is a global phenomenon, not limited to one culture.
And learning from global perspectives helps us understand that peer pressure is not just a teenage drama. It's a universal human struggle.
Resisting peer pressure isn't something that happens overnight. It's like a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger you become. Start small, say no to little things first, like gossips or unhealthy snacks. And soon, you will find it easier to say no to bigger pressures.
Yes, and every time you resist, you build self-respect. That self-respect becomes your armor the next time you're tested.
So, resilience is not a one-time achievement. It's a lifelong practice. Every small victory counts.
At university, peer pressure shifts to independence and lifestyle choice. Some feel pressure to party, drink or date because everyone else is doing it. Others feel pressure to maintain top grades while balancing social life.
I know seniors who joined clubs they weren't interested in just because it was the popular thing to do. They wasted time and energy on activities that didn't match their goals.
So, peer pressure evolves with age. It doesn't disappear. It just changes from depending on life stage.
In the workplace, peer pressure shows up in subtle ways. Colleagues might pressure you to stay late even if your work is done just to prove your dedication. Or they pressure you to gossip or to fit into office politics.
Yes, and sometimes it's about financial appearance. When everyone drives fancy car or goes on leisure trips, you feel pressure to match their lifestyle. Even if you can't afford it, that's adult peer pressure.
And resisting workplace peer pressure requires maturity. It's no longer just about fitting in socially. It's about protecting your ethics, finances, and mental health. Online challenges are another example. Some are fun, like dance trends, but others are dangerous. For example, like risky stunts or harmful debts. Teens often join just because they don't want to be the only one left out.
I remember a viral challenge that encouraged students to skip meals for quick weight loss. Many joined without realizing the health risk. That's the dark side of digital peer pressure.
It shows why we need critical thinking. Just because something is trending doesn't mean it's safe or worth doing.
Peer pressure often forces us into ethical dilemmas. Do we follow the group for acceptance or stay true to our values and risk rejection? It's a classic test of character.
And those choices define us. Cheating, lying, or bullying might win us temporary approval, but the guilt lingers. On the other hand, standing firm might cause us friends, but it builds integrity.
So, resisting peer pressure isn't just about saying no. It's about choosing who you want to be when the group demands otherwise. From a philosophical view, peer pressure raises the question of freedom versus conformity. Humans crave belonging, but true freedom means being authentic, even if it means standing alone. So, which is more important, belonging or authenticity?
I think balance is key. Total freedom without belonging feels lonely, but total conformity erases individuality. We must find a middle ground.
Yes, and peer pressure is the test of whether we can balance both, staying true while still connecting with others.
Peer pressure can be understood through psychology too. Bandura's social learning theory explains that people learn by observing and imitating others. If your peers smoke, cheat, or even volunteer for charity, you are more likely to copy them. It is not just about what they tell you to do, it's about what you see being rewarded.
That makes sense. In school, I noticed students who skip homework and still got love from classmates often encourage others to do the same. The reward wasn't the act itself, but the attention they received.
Exactly. And on the positive side, I once saw a student praised for standing up against bullying. Suddenly, more classmates started showing small acts of courage too. Peer influence through observation spread like wildfire for good this time.
Peer pressure sometimes affects genders differently. For boys, it often focuses on toughness, risk-taking, or dominance. For girls, it may focus on beauty standard, social behavior, or relationships. Both are harmful, but they create unrealistic expectations.
That's true. I've seen boys pressured to fight or hide emotions to prove masculinity, while girls felt pressured to look perfect on social media. Both forms of pressure deny people the right to simply be themselves.
So, while the form may differ, the root is the same. The fear of rejection if you do not conform to group norms. Let's consider a real case. A group of teens once pressured each other online to post mean comments about a classmate. Those who refused were excluded from group chats. That's peer pressure in digital form.
I can imagine how painful that must have been. The victim suffers, but the bystanders who give in also suffer guilt later. They compromise their integrity just to stay included.
Which proves that resisting peer pressure is also an act of protecting not just yourself but to others. Peer pressure doesn't just affect us in the moment, it can shape our long-term identity. Constantly giving in can make you dependent on others' approval, even as an adult.
Yes, people who never learn to say no might end up in a toxic relationship, unhealthy workplace, or financial trouble because they can't resist pressure.
But resisting can also shape you positively. It builds resilience, independence, and confidence. The choices we make under peer pressure ripple through our future. Some people even choose careers due to peer pressure. They follow friends into certain courses or jobs, not because of passion, but because they fear being left behind.
That's risky. I know someone who studied engineering because all his friends did, but he was miserable. He later switched careers and admitted he had been living someone else's dream.
This reminds us, true success is following your own path, even if it means working alone for a while.
Leaders also face peer pressure, but in reverse. Sometimes the group pressures them to make easy or popular choices instead of right ones. Strong leaders must resist and guide others toward integrity.
I admire leaders who dare to be unpopular for the sake of justice, that resisting peer pressure at the highest level.
Leadership, then, is not about avoiding peer pressure, but transforming it using influence to set higher standards. One way to resist peer pressure is to build inner strength, self-awareness, self-esteem, and clarity of values make it harder for others to sway you. If you know who you are, you do not need constant approval.
Yes, and surrounding yourself with supportive peers also helps. If your group respect boundaries, you won't feel forced to compromise.
So, strength is both internal and external, a mix of personal conviction and healthy friendships.
Let's role play again. Imagine two groups invite you. One pressures you into bad habits, the other encourages your growth. Which would you choose?
For me, I choose the second group. Even if they're less cool, they'll help me become a better version of myself.
I agree, Myra. Friendship isn't about quantity, it's about quality. The right group makes you feel accepted without conditions.
That's a powerful reminder. Who you walk with determines where you go.
Schools can play a role in preparing students, teaching critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and assertive communication helps students resist pressure effectively.
Yes, and teachers can model this by showing kindness and courage themselves. Students learn more from what educators do than what they say.
So, pedagogy is also a shield against negative peer influence. Parents too can help. When children feel loved and supported at home, they don't crave approval outside as desperately. A strong family foundation reduces susceptibility to peer pressure.
I noticed that friends who had open communication with parents seemed less worried about fitting in. They had a secure base of confidence.
Yes, because when love is unconditional at home, peer approval becomes less vital.
Some cultures, peer pressure emphasizes collectivism, putting group harmony above individuality. In others, it pushes independence. Both have strength and weakness.
That's fascinating. In collectivity societies, peer pressure can maintain discipline and respect, but it may suppress creativity. In individualist societies, peer pressure may push people towards independence, but sometimes at the cost of community.
So, culture shapes not just how we feel pressure, but also why we feel pressure. With the rise of artificial intelligence, with the rise of AI and virtual reality, peer pressure might even happen in digital worlds. Imagine being pressured by avatars, influencers, or even algorithms pushing trends.
That sounds futuristic, but it's already here. Recommendation algorithms show us what's popular, making us feel like we must follow. Technology amplifies peer influence.
Which means the skills of resisting peer pressure will become even more crucial in the future. For some, faith or spirituality offers strength against peer pressure. Believing in higher values beyond peer approval gives people courage to resist.
Yes, as a person guided by a strong principle won't easily bend to group demands. Their compass is internal, not external.
So, whether it's religion, philosophy, or personal ethics, having a guiding framework protects us from losing ourselves.
If I sum it up, peer pressure is not always negative. It can push us toward growth, disciplines, and courage, but only if it aligns with our values.
And when it doesn't, it becomes destructive, robbing us of authenticity. The challenge is learning to tell the difference.
So, the lesson is not to avoid peer pressure completely, but to master it.
My hope is that future generations learn to turn peer pressure, peer influence into a force for good, where groups encourage kindness, integrity, and excellence instead of conformity and fear.
Yes, if we shift the culture, peer pressure can become peer support. Imagine schools, workplaces, and societies where people uplift rather than fear down.
That vision reminds us peer pressure is not the enemy. Misuse influence is used wisely. It's one of the greatest forces for positive change. Peer pressure, two simple words, yet they hold the power to shape who we become. It can lift us to greatness or drag us to regret. It can build our character or break our spirit. And every single day, each one of us stands at a crossroad. Do we follow blindly or do we stand firmly? Let us not pretend this is easy. The crowd is loud, the temptation is strong, and the fear of rejection ghastly. But remember this, it is better to be rejected for what is right than to be accepted for what is wrong.
I wanted to say this with absolute clarity. Every time you go to negative peer pressure, you surrender a piece of yourself. You give away your values, your dignity, your future. But every time you resist, even if your voice shakes, even if you stand alone, you rise above the noise, you rise above the fear, and you prove to yourself that your worth is not measured by how many people cheer for you, but by how strongly you stand for what is true.
Let us flip the script. What if peer pressure became peer power? But if instead of pushing each other down, we push each other up? Imagine a world where friends pressure friends to be kind, to study harder, to dream bigger, to fight for justice. It is not a fantasy. It starts here, with us, with one choice, one voice, one act of courage. We must be the generation that transforms peer pressure from a change that binds into a ladder that leads.
So, here is our call to action. When the crowd shouts, dare to whisper no. When the crowd mourns, dare to stand tall. When the crowd demands conformity, dare to be different. Because history is never changed by those who blend in. It is changed by those who rise up. Remember this. The loudest voice may not always be right. The stronger force may not always be true. But the purest strength is the voice within you. The voice that says, I will not bend, I will not break, I will not betray who I am. That is the voice you must protect. That is the voice that will carry you into greatness.
That's all from us. Thank you.